Check 1, 2, sound check. Check 1, 2. Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with the Scholar. We're delighted you're here, and we hope you enjoy this afternoon's event with local Harrisburg author Joel Burcat. Before we get started, this is a launch. This is a party. Let's give a big round of applause for Joel Burcat. Of course, before we get started, I'm just going to have a few housekeeping notes. First, we have tickets available for many exciting events that we have planned for the summer, including appearances from Jill Lepore, Drew Hart, and we're almost ready to announce the Harrisburg Book Festival this fall. Please grab an event postcard as you leave and stay tuned to our social media and newsletters so that you never miss an upcoming author appearance or the festival announcement. Second, we encourage you to come away with a signed copy of Whiz Kid today. If you'd like to get your copy signed and personalized, we will be having a post-event signing with Joel. Every purchase supports the author, the bookstore, and our ability to continue running these events. So thank you in advance for your understanding and support of indie bookstores. At this time, I have the honor of introducing our speakers this afternoon. Our interviewer is none other than Harvey Freedenberg. Harvey is a retired attorney who has been writing about books since 2005, and in that time, he has written more than 1,200 reviews, essays, and profiles for publication. He's a member of the National Book Critics Circle and writes for print publication and websites that include BookPage, Book Reporter, Shelf Awareness, and Purpose Reviews. He has appeared as a panelist in programs on book reviewing and publishing at the Delaware Book Festival, the Harrisburg Book Festival, and several local libraries, and has spoken on copyright and contract law for writers at the Penn Writers Conference and New York Book Expo. Harvey served on the board of the Dauphin County Library System for 17 years, including 2 years as its president, and for several years was a member of the selection committee for the One Book, One Community program. Of course, our featured author this evening is Joel Burcat. Joel is an award-winning author of 4 environmental legal thrillers, Drink to Every Beast, Amid Rage, Strange Fire, and his latest, Read the Wind. He has received a number of awards, including a gold medal for environmental fiction from Reader's Favorite for Strange Fire, and as a finalist in the Next Generation Indie Book Awards for Amid Rage. He has written numerous short stories, and he's an active member of the International Thriller Writers and Penn Writers. Burcat lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania with his wife, Gail. Of course, we are here to discuss Joel's new book, co-authored with his father, David, Whiz Kids. Purpose Review writes, quote, father and son writing team Joel and the late Dave Burcat have crafted a novel rich with Philadelphia history and a heavy dose of baseball. A fresh, heartfelt take on the American dream and the golden era of the national pastime. It's an absolute honor to welcome Joel and Harvey back to Midtown Scholar Bookstore. So without further ado, please join me in giving Joel and Harvey a very warm welcome.
Alex, thanks very much. It's great to be back at the finest independent bookstore in the country. Can we have a hand for the Midtown Scholar? Okay, thank you. And Joel, congratulations on the publication of your 5th novel since 2019. This novel is a significant departure from the kinds of books that you've been writing up to this point, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I'd like you to do is sort of introduce the story and then read a short excerpt for the audience.
I will do that in 1 second. I've got to do this. Excuse me. Smile, everybody.
All right.
What was your question?
Take it away.
No, it's my pleasure to be here. Let me offer my personal thanks to Midtown Scholar, to Alex, to Eric, to Catherine, who have really transformed Harrisburg from a literary cultural desert to a cultural oasis. And you're in really, probably in my opinion, the finest independent bookstore in the United States. For those of you who are not from around here, like my brother, you don't understand what kind of a rabbit warren there is when you start going down in here and start going around and what's next door. And I don't even know where these rooms come from, because they're just all over the place, and they all cover different subjects and the like. It's a phenomenal place, and I urge everybody to spend some time here and to buy books, and buy books from your local bookstore if you can. So without any further ado, let me just read a few pages. By the way, and for those of you who know that I'm legally blind, you'll understand why I have to do this. So the setup is that my main character, Ben Green, showed up a good hour late for the family Seder. And as a result of that, his wife, Debbie, is really, really unhappy with him. And she is also unhappy with his life choice, which is to try to become a novelist rather than getting a good-paying job at his friend's father's advertising agency. And she doesn't like the fact that if he becomes a novelist or tries to become a novelist, they could be broke for a long time to come, as opposed to going to work right away for this advertising agency. So we'll just start here, and I'll just read a couple pages. This is Ben speaking. "No, hon, I'm just thinking of fun things we can do before the baby comes along and changes everything." "You think I don't think about that?" replied Debbie. "I'm scared to death that you're going to graduate from college, I'm going to have a baby, and you're not going to have a job. How are we going to afford all the things we'll need? Did it occur to you that we're going to have to pay for a hospital, food, clothing? I want you to get a steady job. I'm tired of living with my parents. How do you think it's going to be when we have a baby? What, we're going to have a crib in the bedroom I grew up with Pop and Mom down the hall?" Ben started to interrupt and thought better of it. "You're the one who wants to pursue this dream of writing a novel, but right now I don't see how that's going to pay the bills. How are we going to afford anything when you're sitting at my little desk over there tapping away on your typewriter? How exactly are we going to take care of ourselves, the baby, while you write this book?" "Wait a minute. This probably isn't the best time to have this conversation. It's late, you're tired, you've been sick all day. Nice of you to finally notice that." "I told you, I apologize. What did you want me to do? Call you on my Dick Tracy two-way wrist radio? Stan just showed up at work tonight. He didn't realize it was Passover. He wanted to take us both out. I messed up and I didn't realize what time it was. The time just got away from me. I'm sorry again." Ben sat on the bed next to Debbie and put his hand on her shoulder. She sat up, pulling away from his grasp. Debbie spoke quietly but evenly. "Look, I won't be able to work for at least a little while after the baby is born. We can't make my parents raise a baby while I work as a receptionist and you play on your typewriter. We're going to need an income, a real income, and your job driving the elevator up and down at the Moffat building isn't going to cut it." Ben looked at the floor. I'm sorry, he sighed. "Okay, look, let's make a deal. I told you that Stan has been after me to join him at his father's ad agency. Frankly, I think he's saying this because he still feels he owes me after Okinawa. Maybe because he knows I'm a much better writer than he is. Anyway, he thinks his father will hire me, but I'm not so sure. His father's firm has never hired anyone Jewish, and I doubt his old man will start doing so now just because Stan tells him he wants to even things up with his war buddy. I'm not planning on hiding what I am, even though I don't really go in for all this religion stuff. I'm sure Ledyard will figure it out soon enough. Anyway, I'll tell Stan that I'll interview, but if I get any interest in this book from a publisher, I want to finish it and go from there." "So what's the deal? You'll interview with Mr. Ledyard and somehow or another put them on hold while you finish the book? No way. They won't agree to that, not while there are thousands of other vets and college men looking for a job. Also, I can't wait forever for you to get a job. I want a deadline, a date. If you don't get a book deal by a date, then you either take a job with Mr. Ledyard or look somewhere else and take that." Debbie's eyes were smoldering and her brow had furrowed. "Well, that could take a while. I have no control over it. There are a lot of guys writing books. I'm not the only one. I may have to wait just to hear from a publisher or an agent. I don't have anything yet that's remotely publishable. Ask Professor Chesterfield." "I don't care. I need to know that my baby is going to have a father with a real job and a home, at the very least an apartment. If you're going to be a writer, that's fine, but you have to earn a living wage at it. If you're going to work for an ad agency, that's fine too. The baby is due on October 15th. By October 1, I want you to either have something in writing from a publisher saying you've got a deal, or you go to work for Mr. Ledyard. That's it. No extensions, no negotiations. I can't have this baby not knowing where I'm going to live or whether we'll be mooching off my parents forever. Debbie rolled over and looked at the wall. The conversation was over.
And Joel, that scene was not Gail talking to you about your writing, was it?
We have very different conversations. She's my CFO.
Okay. So, as I said at the outset of our conversation, you've become known for writing legal thrillers like Drink to Every Beast and Amid Rage and your other two novels. And this is a real departure from those novels. So what motivated you to depart so substantially from a style of writing that's been very successful, that's developed a readership for you?
It's actually a really good question, because this actually was the first novel that I wrote. I began writing in 2008. This is after a long hiatus. I wrote a little bit in college, wrote a little bit a few years later, and then I just put it aside. I was very busy pursuing my day job, which was being a lawyer, an environmental lawyer. And then I just got the bug to start writing in 2008. And in 2009, a very good mutual friend of ours, Carl Schumann, asked me how my novel was coming along. And I said, well, I'm not writing a novel. And his comment to me was, why not? I thought about it, and I thought, why not? I'll write a novel. So I went upstairs to my writing area, and I started writing a novel, and it was this novel back in 2008 or 2009. And I wrote it, spent a year writing it, and I have to say that Stephen King, who wrote a great book called On Writing, was exactly right about your first draft. He says, it's shit, don't show it to anybody. And I put it away. I didn't finish it. I mean, I didn't do much more with it. And it just sat for a few years. And then every couple of years or so, I would pick it up and I would write again. In the meantime, I was writing my other novels. The next book was Drink to Every Beast, the first one that got published. Right. And then Amid Rage, and so the other books were being written. But I was always coming back to this novel because of the special meaning it has to me, and ultimately was able to finish it about a year ago, and then had it published, and so here we are.
So as Alex mentioned, your late father, David Burcat, is credited as the co-author of this novel. Tell us something about him and explain how he earned that co-author credit, and what do you think he would think about this book?
I'll start with the last part of your question. I think he'd be delighted about this. I think he'd really be very happy, maybe more for me than for himself, because he didn't seek any accolades. My dad was a Renaissance man. He did a little bit of everything. I mean, and he was pretty good at most things that he got involved with. So he became a dentist ultimately. And after getting a degree in English literature from University of Pennsylvania, and he wrote this, we think, in around 1950. So he became a dentist about 10 years later, and but he would. I have pictures of him with his butt hanging out of the back of a car. He loved to work and get his hands greasy working on cars. He was a huge fan of the Phillies and the Eagles and the Sixers. He loved classical music. He played keyboard. He played the saxophone. He played the flute. He was an exercise fanatic. My dad was jogging before there was jogging. I remember, Peter, if you were with me, my brother Peter's sitting here in the front row, Judge Peter. And I remember once jogging with my dad. Nobody jogged. We were jogging down 50th Street in Philadelphia at 6 o'clock in the morning, and a police car rolled up behind us, and the Philly cop just gave us one of these, and we stopped and looked back, calls us over, he says, "What are you doing?" And my dad said, "We're running." And the cop said, "From what?" And It was, he had been a boxer when he was a young man, and all the way through his life, he had a little gym that he'd created down in the basement. And sometimes he'd come home at night, and I'd hear thunk-a-da, 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 thunk-a-da as you're working out on the speed bag. I mean, so he was a real Renaissance man, and I think he would have been very pleased. Interesting thing, though, he never talked about his writing to me. So even though he had written this and written some other things, he never pursued it once he left college.
So can you explain exactly what his contribution was to this novel?
My dad died in 1998, and after he died, a few years after he died, my mother was cleaning out some stuff in the basement, and she handed me a pile of papers like this. And she said, look, here are your dad's papers. Do whatever you want with them, or throw them out. Whatever. And I had no idea what they were. I expected they would be old bills or letters or whatever. And in fact, there were some, but mostly it was papers from his college years. And in among those papers was an 18-page manuscript for a novella called Match Point. And I read it, and it was really, to me, it was really interesting and exciting and different. It was a totally different style than people write today, more in the beat style. Burroughs and Kerouac and Ginsberg, that kind of style that was popular in the 1950s. And that was the style that my dad was writing in. And I didn't know what to do with it. So this was around, say, 2001, 2002. Like I said, I didn't start writing until around 2008. And but it was always in my mind, I have to do something with this. The book that I wrote around it, Whiz Kid, is about 300 pages written around his 18 pages. So that was his contribution to this.
Okay. There's a story behind the cover of this novel, and you've got a poster over here. Can you tell us that story?
Absolutely. The story takes place largely in South Philadelphia. Actually, it takes place in South Philly. It also takes place in the main line. There's a number of scenes at the Marion Cricket Club, scenes in Bryn Mawr, scenes that take place at University of Pennsylvania, Camden, the Shore, but the story really is a South Philly story. So when I was looking for the cover, I've never been thrilled with the covers that I've gotten from my publishers. They're fine, they're good covers, but I wanted something special for this book. And it so happens that my daughter, Shira, lives in South Philly, and she said, well, I know a guy, and he has a shop on East Passyunk Avenue, and she says it the right way, by the way. And she said, let me talk to him, and she told me to go to his website, and I'd seen some of his stuff, and he has a business called South Fellini. And he does some really interesting stuff. He's the guy who popularized the statement, I'm from Philly, everyone hates us, we don't care. And he's got T-shirts and all kinds of other stuff. And so I ended up talking with him, and he said, yeah, I've done some book covers. I'd be happy to do one for you. He said, but to keep the price down, if you could make one, if you could find something that I've already done, and we could sort of copy it a bit, he said, I'll follow that as a template. So he had done a poster for like a nightclub poster, what you might see on the side of a building of a nightclub. And it was for Johnny Fontaine. So I'm going to see who, off the top of their head, knows who Johnny Fontaine is. Johnny Fontaine was the singer in the Godfather movie who is based on Frank Sinatra. So he did a phony poster as though Johnny Fontaine had come to Philly to Palumbo's restaurant, and it looks similar to this. And I said, that one, I like that. Can we do that? He said, sure. So we went back and forth for about 2 weeks, and he worked on it relentlessly for that time. And we decided that we wanted to have a lot of the same things that you might see in a nightclub poster on it. So it says featuring Ben Bop Green and the name of the book, of course. And then the photograph is just a great photograph. First of all, it's right out of 1950. And these guys, somebody said, oh, it's Goodfellas. Well, in a way, it's like that. These are guys who are just comfortable, and they are happy. And the guy with the bow tie is my dad.
So you mentioned the South Philadelphia neighborhood in which a good bit of the novel is set. Tell us a little bit more about that neighborhood and the history, and specifically there's a an area that's called the Zibiter, which is a shopping area, a marketplace that has a really interesting history. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So everybody knows about the Lower East Side in New York, and Philadelphia had one like that called the Zibiter. It existed from the late 19th century until about 1960. By 1960, the push carts were gone, the little shops were gone, all of that was gone. A lot of the Jewish community that had really sprung up around the Zibiter had moved on. Either they'd passed away, or they just moved away, or died, or whatever. But for a time, the Zibiter was a very, very vibrant market. My mother, in 1947, wrote an essay, probably for school when she was in high school at Girls High in Philly. And it describes this place, and it's jam-packed with people and push carts and people shouting and selling everything you could imagine, from meat to fish to paint to clothing to whatever. Everything was being sold, and it was just a jam-packed street, and it sounds like it was very much like the Lower East Side, the images that we have of the Lower East Side. For those of you who are familiar with Philly and have been to the Italian market in Philly, it's similar to the Italian market, although I think the Italian market, I've been going there for 50 years, at least that I remember. The Italian market today is sort of a shadow of what it was. If you want to get a sense of what the Italian market looked like back in the day, there's a great scene in Rocky. A great scene in Rocky where he's jogging down a street, and there are vendors on both sides, and somebody tosses him an orange as he's jogging. A minute later, he's jogging up the steps of the Art Museum in Philadelphia. And of course, it's 3.5 miles away, so even Rocky couldn't have jogged 3.5 miles in a few minutes. But it was like that, and that's what the Zibiter was, and it was a wall-to-wall Jewish market.
So in a prologue to the book, you say this book isn't really about baseball, but baseball really is central to this book. And the baseball fans in the audience, certainly the Phillies fans, will know who the Whiz kids were from 1950. But for those who may not be as familiar with Philadelphia baseball history, perhaps you want to tell us a little bit more about that. And really, what role does baseball play in this novel? Because I think it's a really rich part of it.
It's an important part, and it's more than just the background. It's like the constant part of the story. It is, bear in mind that in 1950, several things. Number one, you didn't have the Eagles, you didn't have the Sixers, you didn't have all these other teams. They existed, but people didn't follow them the way they do today. And so people followed baseball, and baseball was the national religion. They call it the national pastime, but it was really the national religion. And people followed it very, very closely. The Philadelphia Inquirer and the 3 other daily newspapers each had half a dozen reporters who covered baseball every day. They had one guy writing about the pitchers, another guy writing about the hitters, another guy writing about the team and the management. It was a big deal back then, and it was what everybody followed. The Phillies had been the literal worst team in baseball for much of the previous 35 years. They had won the National League Championship in 1915, and then from 1915 until 1950, they just lost. They kept losing. They lost continually, and they had a couple of good players like Chuck Klein and a few others who were traded away, and so the team just was miserable. They also had another team called the Philadelphia Athletics that was also miserable in the 1930s and 40s. So they had 2 baseball teams, each competing to be the worst baseball team in baseball at times. But when the Phillies started to play well, and they were playing decently in 1949, but when they started to play well, it was in 1950. And because a lot of these players had come up into baseball during World War II, and a lot of the regular players were serving in the armed forces. You had a lot of guys who literally 15, 16 years old who were playing in the National League. Mm-hmm. And Putsy Caballero and a couple of the others who were 16, 17 years old when they were National League ball players. And so they were thought of as kids. They really were kids. So even in 1950, they were barely drinking age, some of these guys. Robin Roberts, the great Philadelphia Philly, was 22 years old at that time. And one of the sports writers at the time, a guy named Stan Baumgartner, who'd been a pitcher actually for the Philadelphia Athletics, was one of the great sports writers for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And he coined the term Whiz Kids. And that stuck forevermore. And the Philadelphia Phillies of 1950, which, in my humble opinion, was the greatest comeback team of all time. Mm-hmm. And they did something in Philadelphia that nobody would have thought could have been done. They invigorated the town. People were crazy about the Phillies. People who didn't like baseball were crazy about the Phillies. And it was a phenomenal thing, and it really transformed Philadelphia, I think, into the sports town that it still is today.
And you did a lot of research in that period to make sure that the details about the Philly season and what was going on in the city at that time are accurate. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. This is historical fiction, which is different than the other kind of writing that I do. And even though when I'm writing a book on an ecological disaster, and I have to know everything there is to know about trichloroethylene, and then I've got to turn that into something that you, my wonderful readers, are going to be able to understand and enjoy and not fall asleep over, or worse yet, skip over. I had this time frame, and I started with the beginning of spring training in March of 1950, and I ended really in October of 1950 at the end of the story. So I read all the books that were available, of course, but then the other thing is we have a gem of a library that really gets underused, so far as I can tell, in Harrisburg, and that's the State Library. We also have a great local library, the Dauphin County Library. The executive director is sitting here in the front, and I would say that even if he wasn't here, but we were very fortunate to have two very good libraries here in town. But I went down to the State Library every few weeks, and I went through literally every newspaper that had stories about the Phillies in the Philadelphia area from March and through October of 1980. Like I said, there were four newspapers, daily newspapers, and I read every story. I tried to just imbue myself. I read, there were lots of stories sort of just about the general feeling in Philadelphia at the time, and I read about those. I even read the weather, because the weather in my story, it coincides with the actual weather that was taking place. I didn't want to have my characters lounging around in a swimming pool on the day there was a snowstorm. So I made sure that, that was accurate. So there was a tremendous amount of research that went into this.
So, and on the subject of research, there are scenes from World War II in the Pacific, specifically the Battle of Okinawa, in this novel, and they're incredibly realistic. Obviously, you weren't there, and you presumably don't know anybody who was there at this point in history. But what kind of research did you do to make those scenes so vivid?
There basically are two chapters dealing with the Battle of Okinawa. And you're right. I mean, I knew about the Battle of Okinawa before I wrote this, that it was a battle that was fought in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and we won, and that was what I knew. And I knew there was a lot more to the story than that. So I read a number of books on, just in general, on the background of the battle for in the Pacific. And then I read 3 different books, including 2 memoirs of people who had actually fought in Okinawa, because I wanted to get a sense of what it was like in this hand-to-hand combat, this awful hand-to-hand combat that took place. The Allied soldiers were really taken by surprise when they got to Okinawa. Unlike Iwo Jima, unlike D-Day, there was almost no resistance when they got to Okinawa. They got there, and there were a few shots fired, and very, very little actually happened to them. And they really thought they were just going to roll from one end of the island to the other. What they didn't realize was that the Japanese had created a fortress, an underground fortress, in several places in central Okinawa, and they had holed up there. And of course, the Japanese were at the top of the mountain, the Allies were at the bottom of the mountain, and they had to fight their way up. And so it was horrific hand-to-hand combat, and I wanted to try to recreate that in this story. And it's important to the story because one of the main characters in the story is Ben's best friend, Stan Ledyard, and Stan has this unbelievable, strong passion to want to help Ben. And we learn the reason is that Ben saved his life at Okinawa when Ben also won his Silver Star Award and 2 Purple Hearts. So we learn about that. And again, I wanted to make it accurate. I didn't want to make it, movie accurate. I wanted to make it accurate from the descriptions that I'd read from the soldiers who'd actually fought it. So it's a very, I read many books basically to write one chapter.
So there's a really strong female character in this novel named Eileen, and I know from talking to you about the novel that that was one of your favorite characters to write. Can you talk about why that was the case?
Eileen Van Cleve is always the most intelligent person in any room she walks into. And she's also the most beautiful woman in any room that she enters. And she has a thing for Ben, our main character. And a lot of the story deals with their relationship. Ben, of course, is married to Debbie. We read about Debbie a few minutes ago. And his wife is having a baby. But Eileen is really passionate about Ben. So a lot of the story is this interrelationship between Ben and Eileen and their friends. Now, Eileen is the kind of touchy-feely person that we've all met in our lives, and the friends always refer to Eileen being Eileen. Oh, that's just Eileen being Eileen. But it's much more than that, as we come to realize as we read the story, that she's got a much stronger feeling for Ben than just Eileen being Eileen. There's some of my favorite scenes that I've ever written are in this book. There's a diner, of course. There has to be a diner for these college kids. There's a diner, and they sit around, and the dialogue. I'm really, really proud of the dialogue that I wrote. But there's this one point where they're talking about Ben is from Camden, New Jersey, as was my father, by the way. Ben is from Camden, and he mentions that they talk about Walt Whitman, and one of them tries to recite "I Sing the Body Electric," and remembers only a few words from it. By the way, not the song, the actual poem. And Eileen then recites "I Sing the Body Electric," but she does it in the most sensual way that the 3 guys sitting at the table are melting under the table as she's reciting this from memory. And she's always doing stuff like that. Her Latin is flawless. I mean, her ability to they struggle to get B's and C's on their English papers. She regularly gets A's. And, she's just always the most intelligent person, the most flirtatious person. And she's a really, really interesting and complicated character because she's got multiple layers.
So there are a couple of dark undercurrents to this novel, and specifically their anti-Semitism and racism that are themes that kind of run through the novel. Could you talk a little bit about those and how they play into the story with these characters?
I feel in particular when I'm writing historical fiction that it's not just enough to write about something that took place back then in 1950, but I wanted it to shine a light on what's happening in today's world as well. But the anti-Semitism that existed back in 1950, the racism that existed back in 1950 was very strong and powerful. And Ben experiences the anti-Semitism. We learn early on in the story, and one of the nice twists that I will share with you, that when Ben lived in Camden, he'd played saxophone in a largely black ensemble in Camden. And we learn this when he's at a club with his friend Stan, and he gets called up to play sax by one of the other players. But as a result of Ben's relationship with his former bandmates and with several other black characters in the cast, we learn a lot about what they were facing in terms of racism. The guy who drives the elevator, Ben has a job driving an elevator on the weekends when people still drove elevators. And the man who has the regular job, Mr. Washington, has a degree in business from Lincoln University, and he can't get a job in business. And he talks to Ben about that, and we learn about the doors that were closed to people because they were black or because they were Jewish. I do remember my father telling me after he got out of Penn in around 1950, 51, he went to work in an advertising firm, and I remember him telling me about the anti-Semitism that he faced back then, and just relentless anti-Semitism. And he didn't go out of his way to display his Judaism. It wasn't like today where people, are proudly show off their backgrounds. Back then, I think people kept it to themselves. But it was a really relentless kind of thing, and it was pervasive. There was the direct, overt anti-Semitism and racism, and then there was what I call the country club anti-Semitism and racism that only comes out in those moments after people have had one too many.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more question to wrap up our conversation, because we want to allow some time for audience questions, and that is, tell us a little bit about your next book. You are not one of these authors who we have to wait 5 or 10 years for the next novel to come out.
No, I do have another book coming out. I'm going back to my old ways. I've got a book on climate change coming out this fall, and that's going to be called Temperature Rising. I was at Thriller Writers a couple of weeks ago for the annual conference of the Thriller Writers Association at Thriller Fest. And I was talking about Whiz and very excited about it. And one of my good friends from Seattle, and I had talked about it a lot. So when I got back home on Monday after the conference, he said to me, oh, by the way, congratulations on the new book. I got an email from him. I thought, that's really kind of odd, because we talked all about it, and it's sort of late for him to be congratulating me. And I clicked on the attachment, and it was a notice in Publishers Weekly. My publisher had announced my next book coming out in the fall, Temperature Rising. So hopefully I'll be back here, Alex, to talk about that. But so that'll be coming out. I've been starting to think about whether there will be a sequel to Whiz Kid, and I'd very much like to write a sequel to Whiz Kid. It only requires you all to buy about a dozen books each, or to have all your friends buy a lot of books, so that I can justify writing a sequel. And it would be, I'll tell you right now, it would be set in 1964, the year of the gigantic collapse of the Phillies.
Yes.
And it will still follow Ben and his family, and it'll be after the Zibbiter is gone, and after things have changed very much, and Ben's life has taken a turn. But that would be the next book.
Okay, well, with that, we'll wrap up our conversation. Joel, thanks very much. I'll turn it over to Alex Brubaker. If you have a question, raise your hand, and Alex will get to you with the microphone.
Big fan of yours. Enjoyed your books about the environmental situation. I wonder, did you ever go to a coal mine and actually see what happens there at a coal mine?
I've been in dozens of coal mines. So most of the time when I was doing research for my old books, for my other books, I've been able to visit, as a part of my career, I was able to visit scenes or places that I depicted in the story. And they're all sort of amalgams. So even though I might have visited, I don't know, 20 or 30 coal mines, if I'm talking about a single coal mine, it might have a little element from the 20 or 30 mines. And in Whiz Kid, I was in Connie Mack Stadium. I was in a number of these places. I've been to South Philly many, many times. I've been to the Marion Cricket Club. I wasn't in these places in 1950 when they were different, and that required a lot of research to figure out who was giving the address to the graduates in 1950 in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. So I had to do research on that.
Hi. This is such a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed it so much and learned so much. It was really packed with a lot. I have a fast question, and then I have a real question. So fast question is, did your dad ever sleep?
He did. I will tell you that I didn't mention the fact that he was an unbelievable reader. He told me that when he was pursuing his degree in English literature, they actually had to read 2 novels a day. I don't know how you do that, but I do recall that in his later years, he was reading maybe 2 or 3 novels a week. And my favorite story about my dad and his reading was I walked into his room one day, and he's laying on the bed, and he's got a book propped up on his stomach, and he's reading it. And I take a look, and I see it's the dictionary. And I said, I said, what are you doing? You're looking something up? He said, no. He said, I'm reading the dictionary. I said, who reads the dictionary? He said, it's really interesting. I'm up to B.
Okay, so we slept about 20 minutes a day. Okay, the real question is, for writing characters whose, it sounds like mainly they're in their 20s, in the 1950s, what kind of work and background work did you do to get a feeling for the tone in their voice and to write that accurate dialogue?
This comes from another writer, a friend of mine from Thriller Writers. Yes, it was not easy because 1950 was not the 1950s. It wasn't Grease. It wasn't Happy Days. And it also wasn't the 1940s. It was a real transitional time frame. And I just read everything that I could. I tried to find videos, if I could, from that era. And I tried to find things from around 1950 because you're right. It's people. I didn't want to have people walking through a room and going, "Hey guys," because people didn't talk that way back then. So it was difficult to try to find it, but it was just a question of research and trying to imagine how people might have talked back then. There's a great thing that Professor Chesterfield says that I totally made up. Whenever he comes into a room, whenever he leaves, he always uses the Latin word valet, and when he's talking to a group of people, he says valet, and somewhere I saw that word. It means hello and goodbye in Latin. And I figured for Professor Chesterfield, that's how he would greet people. So I don't know that anybody ever used that word ever in the history of Earth, except maybe in Rome. But so some things like that also happenstance.
Delightful. I can't imagine that you were ever in the
That's a great question, by the way, because the writing that you do as a lawyer is totally different than the writing that you do as a novelist. And the style is different, even though they both do kind of the same thing when they're writing. They take words, they put them in a line, and they put a period at the end, and they call it a sentence. Both do the same thing. But novelists write in a very different style than people who are writing briefs. My brother, the judge, is sitting here, and he writes differently as well because he's a judge, and he can just tell people things. He doesn't have to beg for things. And but it's a very different style of writing. And I remember I said I started in 2008. I wrote this from 2009 to 2010, and then I put it away, and I kept coming back to it. This book was rewritten completely from beginning to end about 3 times. And each time I was trying to sort of push away the legalese and get rid of that and make it more of a novel. And I think it works very, very well now as a novel, and it doesn't look like it was written by a lawyer.
Where was the Zitter? Like in Philly, where are you talking about?
It was South 7th Street at about McKean and Snyder in that area. So if you know do you know where the Italian market is in Philly? So the Italian market's on 9th Street, 9th and Christian. So if you go another 4 blocks south and then 2 blocks east, you get to about 7th and Snyder, and that's where the Zitter was. Today, it's completely gone. We were there about a year ago, and you wouldn't know that at one time you had push carts and people standing, shoulder to shoulder, and all of that was going on. It's gone.
I lived there in the 70s, and this is the first I've heard about it. My daughter's living there too.
In South Philly?
Well, I lived in the city, but I spent time in South Philly because I ate at Columbo's and chocolate beef on the market. But I never heard of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's totally gone, and there's a little synagogue. It's growing very quickly called the South Philly Stiebel, and they're actually having a series of programs on Jewish South Philly because that was where all the immigrants landed when they came to Philadelphia, and many of them were either on 7th Street or near 7th Street, and they're trying to do to learn as much about that era as possible because that era. And most of the Jewish population of South Philly completely died out by the 60s and 70s. It was gone and replaced by other immigrants who came in and took their places. So it's a dynamic situation, but totally different today and largely forgotten. But we're going to see what we can do to at least have it remembered.
And did you eat at Columbo's?
I never did, no.
Used to be like buy one, get one free. It was date night in college.
Hey, Joel. You were talking a little bit about how writing this novel was different, and you can tell this is a different voice. This novel is in a different voice than your previous novels, and that really comes out. How much of the story that your father wrote was complete? Had he written pretty much a complete short story? And how much did you have to expand on his story to put the novel together?
My dad's story is complete in this book. It was about 18 pages long. Some of the chapters were just a page long. And I didn't change a word of it. Jason Liller, I don't know if Jason's here today, but Jason Liller was my first editor. He wanted to change it and clean it up and modernize it, and I said, do not touch a word. And then when Sunbury Press was getting ready to publish it, they had an editor work on it as well, and she wanted to edit it, and I said, don't touch it, just leave it exactly as it is. This is Ben Green's novel, and this is going to be his with all of its whatever errors it might have, including punctuation and other things. So it's exactly the words that my dad used when he wrote Match Point back in 1950. And I wanted it that way. I wanted it both because I felt it was appropriate to the story and also to honor my dad. And so what you read is exactly what he wrote, which was unfinished. I got a sense when you read the last chapter that he wrote, I believe his last two words might be something like "screw you," and I got a sense that might have been his frustration about writing, and that was it. He was done writing at that point. But the other thing, in terms of my voice, voice is something that authors work on for their entire careers. And that's something that I've been working on for over 15 years now, trying to develop my own voice as a writer. And sometimes your voice is a little different in one story from the next. And this one in particular, it's a different style because the story is different, and because Ben, our main character, is a different character than Mike Jacobs or some of the other characters I've written about. Even that character Ted Reese has a different sound to him.
Don't tell me what happens to him.
I wanted to ask you a question. I'm old enough to remember Conemack Stadium and taking excursions from Harrisburg to Philadelphia to the ballpark. In your research, I recall it as Shibe Park. When did you go from Shibe Park to Conemack Stadium?
That was sometime in the 1960s. They changed the name to honor Connie Mack, who was the great manager and owner of the Philadelphia Athletics. And so at some point they changed the name. I don't know exactly when that was, but I'll have to research that and pin that down, because you're going to be the first person of many who are going to ask me that question, I'm sure. But it was the same place.
So it was actually Shibe Park,
right,
in the book.
Right, it was Shibe Park. And there's a scene from 1935 where they go to the Phillies' original stadium, which was called the Baker Bowl.
Questions?
I got a question. I'm just up here. Sorry, I'm not in the general seating area, but as far as your father's book, Match Point, are pages distributed throughout the whole book, or does it occur in just like its own chapter?
We follow Ben's journey as a writer. So you start out knowing that he's got chapter 1 in his briefcase right at the very beginning, and we know that he's excited about it. He's going to show it to his mentor, Professor Chesterfield, his English professor. And we know that he's writing this, and he presents that to Chesterfield, and then Chesterfield takes his red pen and he marks it all up. But Ben doesn't give up. He continues working on it. So every couple of chapters we're presented with another chapter from Match Point. So it goes throughout the book. We see different chapters of Match Point throughout the book. And let me say one more thing related to baseball, because I mentioned baseball earlier, but baseball really is the background of the story. When people get together It's effectively go Phils. They talk about baseball. They talk about the players. They talk about the injuries that they have. They talk about their hitting slumps. They talk about the guys who are doing really well. There are several scenes that I did that just to me were some of my favorite things that I've ever written. For example, envisioning Robin Roberts, envisioning what it was like at a baseball game, not from the stands, but also from the field. And I felt as a writer I could take that liberty. And so there are several scenes that take place with the actual baseball players of that era. And, you know, that's fiction, but I think it's pretty close to what they might have said. But it was great fun to be able to write that and to be able to write these characters.
Can we close with you revealing your connection to Robin Roberts?
So,
unless there are any more questions from the audience? Okay, this is a good place to wrap.
So my parents were gigantic Phillies fans. I was born in 1954. They told me that their very favorite baseball player was Robin Roberts, which was easy to understand. And my full name is Joel Robin Burcat. So my parents actually named me after Robin Roberts.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. Thanks, everyone. Alex?
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Harvey. Congratulations, Joel. This is now your fifth novel, Whiz Kid. We have copies available to purchase at the cafe. We're going to have a book signing with Joel over at this table here. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
My wife and I had an opportunity to meet Richie Ashburn when he was broadcasting.
And Harry Tawish.
Okay, so our son did something, and somehow we got invited. We went up to the booth and we met Richie and Harry Tawish. It was really pretty cool stuff. It's good to see you again. I appreciate it. No problem at all. Have a copy and a good to see you. Thank you for telling him about that. Sure.
Time always goes too fast. I got the 5-minute signal from Alex.
Well done, man. Great stuff. I'm going to go get a Zoom, but did you get a book? You're going to sign it to us later?
Yeah,
it's on the list.
run, but
it's on the list.
wonderful. It's exciting.
Good stuff. Really fun. They let you on campus like you asked there. They let you go on. They let him on the campus. You use some big words to get on? Or just arrogant? You're really arrogant. No, it's okay. We're good. I did. Not any questions and answers. Okay.
send you the questions and answers about the whole thing. I'll send you it.